Perfect. I would say this is something which is a very, very long time waiting for this. We're here in the community for almost 7 years, and the fact that this is the first time we're doing it is not a taina on you, it's a taina on me. But whoever is not here, I'd advise you before you eat in their homes, you should make sure that they know the halachas. It is almost impossible today to keep a kosher home if you don't know. It's not something that you could do today with the vast amount of products that are out there. With the complete inability for the layman to be able to know what yes and what not, we are absolutely dependent on knowledge and learning. Saying I don't know is no longer an excuse when you have organizations like the OU who agreed to come out to educate the public. Like we spoke about on Shabbos, this is the bedrock of Yiddishkeit, our body, our guf, that is every single thing we do, every mitzvah we do, every dvar Torah we learn is only with a guf, and whether it's either a guf kosher or not. And let this be a tremendous chus for our entire community that we came together, and this is the first of a series, Bez Hashem. And I want to really thank the OU for coming out here. Let's use this opportunity. Rabbi say, when sometimes in the middle of a shir, someone could hack in a question, a shaila, this is the time to make sure any question you have, all the things you assume, that you could look at an ingredient, that if it's vegetarian, it's good. Don't call me with it. Don't send your wives to call me with it. I don't know these halachas. The OU does. So let's don't have any rachmanas on them. This is they get paid the big bucks to know the real answers. So with further ado, we'd like to again thank the OU, and Amir Hashem, this is going to be the first of a few different shiurim.
Thank you, Rabbi Rotberg. My name is Rabbi Elif. I'm the Managing Director of Community Relations for OU Kosher. I'm not speaking that long. Okay. I'm just going to be introducing today. We have a wonderful lineup. Some of our very best are here to answer your questions today. First off, our topic today is called Demystifying Kashrus. People have all sorts of questions. It seems to be that the kashrus exists in the luft, in the cloud, for those of us that are a little younger. And how does it exactly work? What's going on? Why? What might be the issues? So first we're going to have the pleasure of introducing Rabbi Mordechai Starashevsky, one of our top rabbinic coordinators who specializes in ingredients nutritionals, who will be giving you the basic building blocks of kashrus. What is that's going on behind the scenes? What could be the problems? And then we're also zeicha today to have our Chief Operating Officer, Rabbi Moshe Elephant, who came this morning after saying Shir in Borough Park, to be with us to really answer the questions that you have. For those that have questions, and I'm sure a lot of you will have questions, the best thing to do is be able to email us. You can email us at koshereducationou.org, and I'll be able to pull up your questions as they come along. Or we'll have a pad and pen. We'll have papers and pens at the bima over there. We can take them and then hand in the questions so that we can control instead of everyone jumping at once. So again, that email address is koshereducation@ou.org, or we'll have a pad and pens at the bima over here where you can write down your questions, and we'll go through them because a lot of times people have the same questions. We'll be able to review them as we go along. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Mordechai Starashevsky, a kind of a local. He's from Whispering Pines, which used to be the outskirts of Lakewood once upon a time when he first moved there. Now that's considered, I think, like three towns over or something like that from here. But we'll discuss the basics of kashrus and kosher certification.
Thank you, Rabbi Ella, for your lavish introduction. They say about Harry Truman that he one time got a very nice introduction. So he got up and said, "I wish my parents were here to hear that. My father would have gotten a kick out of that. My mother might have actually believed it." So Rabbi Rotberg is handing out the handout. You have here Kroger's, just pulled a random Kroger's donut holes. I assume donut holes are not the air inside the donut. I assume it's the little piece that was inside the donut. So we look at an ingredient label. My parents' generation, circa 1950s, growing up, you ate Mars, you ate Snickers. You look at the ingredient label. If it didn't say lard and it didn't say gelatin, you figured you're good to go. To know about potassium sorbate and monodiglycerides was just not in their framework. Who knows what those things are anyway? So let's take a look. Before we get to the ingredients, when we look at a plant, we look at two things. When we certify a plant initially and ongoing, we look at two things: ingredients and line status, equipment status. Ingredients, of course, all the ingredients have to be kosher. Pretty basic. Line status also, that they can't be shared equipment. If there's tray for ingredients in the plant, then they can't be run on that same equipment. Blias, of course, if not, then the equipment has to be kashed. So, you can look at a tuna fish can. Well, it looks just innocuous. It's just tuna fish. Well, tris trufa, the Mishnah Avodah Zarah says you can have fish without simonim. Also, and more to the point, you can have just a basic corn, a canned corn, canned beans, canned chickpeas. I mean, what can it's one ingredient. Yeah, but all cans for process reasons, bacteria reasons, they're cooked in retorts. A retort is as big. If you ever saw if you ever saw a movie about World War II, and you see these submarines, and you see these torpedo tubes that you stick. So think about that torpedo tube. It's called in food technology a retort, an autoclave. What happens is you put these things, you put in these cans into them, and they're cooked with steam under pressure. And in these same retorts, you have other tray for things. You have pork and beans cooked over this. You can have literally pork and beans going into a retort, cooked up with steam, cooked up with water. They save that steam, of course. You don't want to throw out, good utilities. So you save that steam, that water, and then put in the next batch. Put in beans, put in corn, put in anything which is, what you would think is pretty much innocuous. Ketchup, pretty basic. Again, tomato sauce, a little bit of vinegar, which vinegar is not what we call a group one ingredient. It's not, it's needs, there might be wine vinegar in a plant, but white distilled vinegar, pretty much. I mean, there might be ethanol. It's made out of ethanol. There might be grape ethanol, but pretty unlikely. So vinegar, there's vinegar in the tomato, in the ketchup, but this same tomato, it's cooked in a kettle. Ketchup is cooked in the same kettle with meat sauce or cheese sauce, or both together, meat and cheese sauce, and these various things. You see an ingredient, it looks fairly innocuous. It looks just about, all these ingredients are pretty basic and straightforward, but anything but, because even naniach that all the ingredients are kosher, and that's, sometimes a jump, even if that's true, still it's cooked on the same equipment as treif, or potentially cooked on the same equipment as treif. Look at the handout that we gave, the Kroger ingredients. So we have for this donut holes, we have ingredients: enriched flour, whole parentheses wheat flour with all the various enrichments, and that's worthy of a share in itself. There's folic acid, sugar, water, palm oil, dextrose, soybean oil, defatted soy flour, whey, leavening, egg yolk, salt, wheat starch, milk protein concentrate, monoamine glycerides, natural artificial flavor, potassium sorbate, gum arabic, enzymes, beta carotene. And the glaze has some other ingredients. What? Extras? No, I only copied 30, I'm sorry. I have more bigger ambitions for next time. What could anybody hazard a guess as to which possible Isuri D'Oraisis over here and which possible Isuri D'Rabbanans are in this? This one's kosher, certified. You see the OU on it. There's a OUD, but what do you say? So flavors are always going to be bottled. So, but it's a bit lataimus. That's Issa D'Rabbanan. Very good. We'll get that in a second. What Issa D'Oraisa could it be over here?
Milk protein. How do you know the milk is from a cow? Wait.
Milk protein is presumably from a cow.
But if it's not from a cow,
It might not be, but that's a shmuz on itself. But it's a potential sensitive topic. The Moshe Tzak is that the milk, anything. But there's a standard. It's one thing that's good to say. There's a standard of identity, SOR. You can't just call anything you want to call it by law. So if something is called, for example, red wine vinegar, it's not that you took apple juice and fermented it into a cider, or corn, which by definition is wine, and then you colored it red and you made it into vinegar. It's red wine vinegar. It's not, because the standard of identity, and as a matter of fact, Skippy's had to change. It used to be a standard of identity for peanut butter, had to be a certain amount of peanuts, and then Skippy's wanted to add some peanut oil, so they lobbied to change the standard of identity. You have, for example, talk about milk for a second. You have the American dairy industry has a hard time competing in some aspects with the European dairy industry. So specifically, casein. Casein is the protein in the milk. So they lobbied the government, and the government was agreed to call that a non-dairy item. Lahalacha, and practically, allergenically, that's the most milky part of the milk. So, okay, that's an example of perhaps, but again, it fits a standard of identity. Here the standard of identity is actually a little off. My point is, when it's milk, it means cow milk. Okay, anybody else has it a guess?
Gelatin with dairy, gelatin with dairy.
It doesn't say gelatin. Whey, what would be the right about whey? Whey is a byproduct of cheese production. Whey, according to Moshe, even if the ingredients were used in making cheese, and we're getting ahead of ourselves, really each one of these topics is worthy of a shear. But let's talk about it afterwards. Whey will not, at least the Eved, will only be the Rabbanon, and at the Eved, on the Eved level, it might even be fine.
What about powder?
What powder?
Milk powder.
Milk powder is a potential issue, but it would be an issue of blias because maybe it's a shared equipment, a shared spray dryer or a shared powder dryer with other things. It's usually not the case because milk is a commodity and they make so much of it. They usually have dedicated equipment. Again, but potentially, it needs to have some, but potentially, what I'm looking for is monodiglycerides. Monodiglycerides. So look at the handout. Look at the back. Flip over the label, and you'll see the big E. The E is a triglyceride. There's a glycerin core, top right corner. There's a glycerin core, glycerin spine, and 3 amino acid chains. On every oil is called a triglyceride. Some are medium chain triglycerides, and it just means that the fatty acid chain is not that long. It's maybe only 10 carbons long. And palm oil and coconut oil and lard and tallow are long chain triglycerides. Longer chains, about 18 to 20 carbons long. So, the better cuts come out of lard and tallow. You could do it out of vegetable as well. You look under there, could anybody know their American history, knowing what was the connection between P&G, Procter & Gamble, and Coca-Cola? The story is like this. There was Reb Tovia Geffen, otherwise known in literature as Rabbi Tobias Geffen. He was a Rav, started off he's an immigrant, he started off in New York, he went to Canton, Ohio. Health reasons, he moved down to Atlanta. And in the mid-30s, getting in the South, wanted to drink Coca-Cola, they wanted to Americanize. The parents were, the greenhorns, were okay with seltzer. They wanted Coke, and they approached him to give a hechsher on Coke. And he approached Coca-Cola, and wonder of wonders, Coke shared with him the secret formula. Supposedly not the percentages, but the ingredients. And he identified glycerin as being an issue. And even though Coke assured him, don't forget it's in the syrup, then they put in water afterwards, and Coke assured him, this is all public information, you type it on the web, Coke and Pesach, or Coke and Rabbi Geffen, and Coke and Procter & Gamble, it's all there. The glycerin's going to be bottled by Elif maybe. But there's a Rajba, there's a Ben Yerucham, not for now, that when an ingredient is put in deliberately, it's not bottled. If so, there's glycerin here, Procter & Gamble. Now, Procter & Gamble uses the fatty acids not for food purposes. Procter & Gamble, of course, makes detergents. So the process of making detergents, they take the fatty acids, they put it through a hydrolysis. Hydrolysis is a fancy way of saying that you break apart with water usually, you break apart the glycerin core from the fatty acids. The fatty acids go through saponification, which just means to make soap out of them, and they were left with glycerin. They needed the soap. They didn't want the glycerin. Glycerin, it just happens to be a valuable byproduct. And any suspension, including children's Tylenol, including Coke, obviously, a lot of liquids will have glycerin. Glycerin is a thick liquid, Swedish liquid. It's used as a carrier. It holds. You can mix a lot of things in it. It can hold it in shape. So glycerin is an indispensable ingredient in food production. And in this case, they were using glycerin from tallow. Now, by the way, anybody knows the difference tallow and lard? So we have it on the handout. Yeah. If it says oink, it's lard. If it says moo, it's tallow. So either way, no practical difference. They're both nevelas and treifas. Either way, nevelas and treifas in the case of the cow, and just in the case of the oink, it's just usher. So Coke actually approached Procter and Gamble, and Procter and Gamble agreed to change the source of their soaps to palm oil and coconut oil. And they broke that apart, and they end up with glycerin and the fatty acids themselves. And that glycerin went over to Coke, obviously, for their ingredients. Now, another thing we mentioned before, the flavors. Issa d'Rabbanan, flavors. Flavors, the 3 C's. We wrote it down over here, the 3 C's. The civet, castoreum, I think I spelled it wrong, there seems to be E over there, and carmine. Carmine, actually a 4th C, because carmine comes from the cochineal beetle. Did you know that? No. Cochineal beetle. My friend from Whispering Pines, I guess we didn't smooth enough about this. And, so, the cochineal beetle. So it used to be that one of the colors, the red color, was found to be a carcinogen, and a lot of companies doing red food dye use carmine. Carmine comes from a beetle called the cochineal beetle. Big sugya, is a pashtus is that it's usher, that colors are not, even though of course it's a small amount, pashtus colors are not bottled. So you have civet and castoreum in flavors. Just to mention, this is the 3 C's, just to mention a few. There are many which can impart flavor. Of course, the taima avida is not bottled. Again, on a abundant level. But us in Lakewood and Townsville, we keep the abundance as well, not just their ices. So it's.
Where are they getting? They're actually harvesting cats.
100%. Civet is a cat. It's a cat-like thing. It's actually.
Before this?
Oh, definitely, yeah. It's used in many. The purpose of the civet is found in many flavors: butter flavor, caramel flavor, and rum flavor. Today, in the flavor house, you look in your store in Trader Joe, you look in your natural, and just to bring out this point, you look on the label, it doesn't say what's in it. It says natural and artificial flavor. In these flavors are going to be potentially.
No one ever heard of that.
Okay.
Crazy. They're raising
That's why you pay us.
Should we ask if we should
Castoreum is used in vanilla ice cream, used in raspberry. Carmine, of course, like we said, is used in colorings. So, just to bring out the point, why? I just want to take you through monodicglyceride I have another 5 minutes, Rabbi? Just want to take you through monodicglyceride. The process, I find it particularly fascinating. They take palm oil from overseas, usually, because we don't have enough palm in the U.S. to use commercially. So they come from Indonesia, from Malaysia, from the Philippines. They come in boats, and palm oil is a salad at room temperature, which is why it's used as an ingredient in cookies, because it keeps it chewy. It's an oil, but it's not liquidy. It keeps it chewy. So in your big cookies, you're going to see always palm oil is going to be in there. It's shipped. It's a salad at room temperature. It has to be shipped as a liquid, so it's heated. So the OU keeps a cheshbon. We work with our shipping companies to make sure that we know that the holes that are kept in were not used for trade for things before. So right away, before they even come onto American shores, we're involved to make sure that they're not getting bleeds of typhus. They're put into a column. I just was involved in cashing one of those. They use outside of Boston, a plant that had tallow. Now it's using kosher. They switched over to veg. And veg includes soy, includes, like we said, coconut, palm. It's 107 feet high. Under high pressure, they put in steam and water, and that hydrolyzes it. The fats go to the top, and the glycerin, which is now mostly water, falls to the bottom. It's called sweet water. then it goes through a process. So the fats go to the top, it's separate. So we'll get to that in a second. The glycerin goes to the bottom and goes through an evaporator system. Evaporating system, I'll just take you through it quickly, 30 seconds. It's particularly fascinating because anything under pressure, as we know, raises the boiling point.
Who checks that?
Raises the boiling point, so it's still a liquid. Under vacuum, the other way around, it lowers the boiling point, so the boiling point is less. So here the boiling point, it can be very high temperatures, but it's under heavy pressure. So it goes out to the evap system, and by the evap system, it just right away drops to atmospheric pressure. So the water flashes off in the form of steam. That steam is captured, that's the first effect. It goes to the second effect, where that steam heats it up again, and so on, the third effect, the fourth effect, until it comes out of this evap system at about 50% glycerin, 50-50 water, then it goes to a refinery system that gets it to the rest of the way. By the way, this sounds a little esoteric. You all have this in your houses, multiple units of this form of machinery, pressure, and you have in your car at least one, some might have two, air conditioner and refrigerator. Your Freon, which meets the hot air in the house through the coils, the fan blows the hot air through the coils, so the Freon gets hot, and that's of course a heat exchanger, which is another thing in kashrus we deal with a lot. It takes the heat and that goes through a compressor. It compresses it, makes it very hot. It blows a fan from outside to cool down that under pressure. So now it makes it even hot, not room temperature, it makes the outside temperature 100 degrees, 90 degrees, and under pressure. So now when it goes through the expansion valve, it becomes very cold. And there's no flash off, it's all a self-contained system. But the point is the same, that it goes through, Rabbi Zalman and Mincha Shloimeh has a whole arichas on this, how fridge, air conditioning work. I confess, I didn't understand all the hard Hebrew words over there, but it's all there. He explains the whole thing. So somebody said he went to speak to Rabbi Zalman, went to speak to a few Gedolei Eretz Yisrael, and each one of them, he wasn't sure if the psak that he got was 100%, not because he doubted the koyach in halacha, he doubted his own koyach hasbara, if he can explain a machine to them properly. So Rabbi Zalman, no problem. As soon as he started, Rabbi Zalman interrupted and explained the whole machine to him. So that's the point of this. The point of this evap system, like we said, gets glycerin. Okay, that's glycerin, which is used like we said. The other side, and this is what I want to get to. The other side that comes out the top, the lighter, the fatty acids. The fatty acids go through many processes. Hydrogenation to hydrolyze them, make them hydrogenated vegetable fats. Of course, will be one use. Food shortening, which it's a bad rap these days because it's not good for the arteries. And it's used in one of the fatty acids which come out of stearic acid. Another one is oleic acid. Stearic acid is found in many products, including monodiglycerides, polysorbate 80, emulsifiers. Emulsifiers are, monodiglycerides is another word for emulsifiers. They take water, oil, like we mentioned here last time, in Cheder they taught us that oil and water, nothing mixes, you get another oil, they rise to the top. Well, that's always true, except in the case where there's an emulsifier. Emulsifier keeps it together. And these emulsifiers, all foods will have, anytime there's oil and water in there, needs an emulsifier to hold it in suspension. If it's not held in suspension, you get, mayonnaise, you get the oil rising, you have to shake it up. So those are all fatty acids. Fatty acids, again, could come from stearic, could come from down. Even if you know for sure, in Yovi Eliyahu, that this came from vegetable oil, doesn't make a difference. They reuse it in the same equipment, and it's not water soluble. You can't clean it. The one that I cashed used with 15,000 pounds of steam, spraying every bit of it until that was clean. And yes, I checked it personally. I have a picture of me on the top of it. So otherwise, it doesn't stay clean. There could be significant amount of tallow in this vegetable oil. And just to get to our second point, even if you have, and that's as far as the polysorbate, as the triglyceride, as the monodiglycerides, the emulsifier. You have your mayonnaise. Picture of mayonnaise over here. Mayonnaise is soybean oil with water. It's held together by an emulsifier. Anybody knows what the emulsifier is in mayonnaise? Egg. You put only the emulsifier in good mayonnaise is eggs, and eggs, they first put the water in, and the vinegar, the spices, they put the egg, and they put in the oil with a high shear mixer to give that frothy look, and it's held together at that. When you go to the store, there are many of these issues. We just touched on a few now, and we'll leave it to Rabbi Elephant to the rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Starashevsky. Again, you can email. We have a pad going around with different questions. If you have questions that you'd like Rabbi Elephant to address, hopefully we'll have time now to discuss them. We have already several questions that have come up. Also, I would just let people know that the OU publishes every year a guide to Pesach or a guide to Passover. We do have, by the Bima, several copies that are available. Some wives may have taken them home when they're here for the ladies program a week ago. But we have complimentary copies available for people to take home to help with their Pesach preparations. Start with the box that's open on the bottom, and then we can go to the other one. Just switching over the mic. I would like to introduce my boss, the Chief Operating Officer of OU Kosher, Rabbi Moshe Elephant, who oversees the OU's global reach, which means, just to give you an idea of the scope, the OU currently certifies 1.3 million products produced in 13,000 facilities in all 50 states and 106 countries around the world, overseen by a team of 50 rabbinic coordinators and 200 and some odd support staff in our offices and 1,100 mashgichim globally. It means someone is doing something every minute of the day. We even have mashgichim that are in factories on Yom Kippur, davening Ne'ilah and Kol Nidre. They're blowing shofar. They're having Pesach Seder in factories in order to make sure that there's hashgacha in the food that you have. So, without any further ado, I call up Rabbi Elephant to address the item.
Thank you, Rabbi Elephant. I didn't know I had such a difficult job myself till now. Thank you for having us. It's real schus. Move it up a little. I know that Rabbi Elif told me last night that the Rav Shlita would like us to concentrate on answering questions, which I'll be happy to do. I just want to make a number of introductory remarks, and that is as follows. The first is, as everybody's getting ready for Yontif, and everybody's going shopping. I presume there's going to be a lot of shopping today. I presume there are a lot of people here today, so they shouldn't have to be shopping. And this point that I want to make is so critical. And as when you're going to the store, whichever store you go to, and whichever product you buy, the point is not which store, the point is not which product, and the point is not which hechsher. Those are your decisions. But what you have to look for, is for the kosher Pesach symbol. Just because it's being sold in a kosher Pesach store or a kosher Pesach section does not mean that it's kosher Pesach. And the assumption that it is could get you into a lot of trouble. The story I always repeat, but there are so many more I could give you, is the woman who called me on Erev Pesach who had cooked 24 rolls of gefilte fish because she bought them or assumed or whatever that they were all kosher Pesach. And on Erev Pesach, after the Zman Isser Chametz, she realized that they were not kosher Pesach. So all of those rolls were obviously Chametz Gomer, because gefilte fish that's not kosher Pesach is Chametz Gomer. She didn't have fish for Yontif. The pots and pans that she cooked those fish in were not kosher l'chesach anymore. They were used for chametz gomer. And after the Zman Isser Chametz on Erev Pesach, you can't even kasher a keli anymore. And there's even a question if you could still do a mechiras chametz on it. That's a Shabbos Hagol drasha. But I'm not here to give you a Shabbos Hagol drasha. I'm here to tell you to look for the symbol. And this is not just for Pesach. For Pesach, it means that even if you're finding a symbol, you have to make sure that it has the kosher Pesach designation. But I can't tell you, and this is mamish every single day, that I get calls from people that go to stores, whether it's in Brooklyn or here in Lakewood, and from neighborhoods and in stores that are catering to the Frum Oilam, But the store is not a hechsher. And the hashgachas that appear in stores don't give hashgacha to groceries. They give hashgacha to the takeout section, to the bakery section, to the fish section. There is a hashgacha, which we could talk about what it is or what it isn't. But groceries, the assumption is that you, the consumer, are buying what you feel is kosher. You're relying on the hechsher, whatever you're relying on. You're relying on what your Rav told you. But they're not taking a chrayas that it's kosher. There's no one taking a chrayas that anything in those sections is kosher at all, or a hechsher that you are comfortable with. And I can't tell you how many people tell me, and I still remember, I got a call one day, I live in Borough Park, for somebody who went to a local store near where I live and says, I'm so happy to hear that Stella Doro became Pas Yisrael and Chol Yisrael. I said, what makes you think that Stella Doro cookies are Pas Yisrael and Chol Yisrael? He said, well, I saw it being sold in the supermarket in our neighborhood. So they wouldn't sell something which isn't Pas Yisrael or Chol Yisrael. That's not true. And nobody did anything wrong. The supermarket doesn't have any sign saying that everything here is Chol Yisrael, Pas Yisrael. And therefore it's your achrayas and the customer's achrayas to make sure what you're buying is a hechsher that you're comfortable with, is it taka labeled with the proper Pesach hashgacha, not that you should have frustration and real serious shilas as Yom Tov comes. The one other issue I'd like to say as an introduction, which is I think critically important. You know, I may be one of the oldest people in this room. And I've seen the world of kashrus go from here to here to here. What do I mean? Rabbi Starashevsky, who's much younger than me, and spoke about the world that we grew up in, where you looked at the ingredients and you think that you knew everything that the ingredient panel said, and you ate it. I remember a number of years ago, the OU certified Tootsie Rolls, and they sent a whole big bag to the OU to give us a treat. But Tootsie Rolls are not Chol Yisrael, and I'm makbid on Chol Yisrael. So somebody came over to me and said, don't you feel bad that you can't taste the Tootsie Roll? I said, actually, I already had it. He said, what do you mean you already had it? They just became certified last week. I said, yeah, but when we were young, everybody ate Tootsie Rolls. So I already had Tootsie Rolls. So that was the world that we grew up in. And I'm just talking historical. Then the world, and there are a lot of heroes in the story, not me, but there are people who devoted their lives to kashrus. I don't know if anybody here is from Chicago. There was a Rav, a Mashgiach in Chicago, his name was Reb Chaim Goldschlag Zatzal. This was a man who worked for the OU for 50 years and wasn't home mishabbos l'shabbos. He traveled the world. I remember one day I'm sitting in my office and he's in India and he calls me. I say, Reb Chaim, what's doing? He says, we're stuck in a ditch because I got stuck in a monsoon. And I say to him, you know, if you call me from a factory, I had such a story also. I was working for OU 2-3 weeks, just 2-3 weeks, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and I get a call from Chaim Goldzweig, and he's in Hawaii and a factory, and he had a shiloh. And I said to him, Chaim, you're calling me at 2 in the morning, and you're the expert? He says, you're my boss now, I gotta call you. I said, 2 in the morning? He says, that's when I call. And then he was a tzaddik. It was a company called Manaloa Macadamia Nuts. They sent me a case of nuts because he told them I made the rabbi. I woke up the rabbi. So he calls me and he says to me, I'm stuck in India in a monsoon in a ditch. He said, Sir Chaim, what should I do for you? He says, if I'm suffering, you're going to suffer with me. So these are people that build kashrus. These are people that build kashrus in America and around the world. And they did a fantastic job. And the level of conscientiousness regarding kashrus has changed dramatically. And there's the world of, I look at the ingredient panel, as Rabbi Starashevsky just spoke so eloquently, about assuming and making all sorts of assumptions, and you don't even know how to pronounce the word. So if I don't know how to pronounce the word, it must be a chemical and it's Cornish McGonish. We went away from that, and that's great. But what I'm finding now, based on the questions that we're getting, and I don't know if some of those questions will be in today's list, is people want to have everything. You know, being kosher means I want to really be kosher, tachlis akashrus. The Rav said in his introductory remarks that that's the side of a Jewish home. We at the OU every year have a conference. Every year have a conference of all the Rabbanim and the main Mashgichim, usually during the Sfira time. And a few years ago, we try every year to invite a Rosh Yeshiva, a Rav, to address us. A few years ago, I had the schus to have a shaykhus. My son is here. He learned in Novominsk. I had a shaykhus with Novominsk Rebbe. So I invited the Novominsk Rebbe to speak. And the Novominsk Rebbe said exactly what you said. The Novominsk Rebbe said, I come here to the OU, not the Aguda. I come here because Klal Yisrael owes you a thank you. He says, if there's such Baruch Hashem in Lakewood, and there's such a Baruch Hashem expansion and growth of Limud Torah, you could only have that type of Limud Torah in bodies that are only eating kosher food. And if there wasn't kosher food, we couldn't have so many B'nai Torah learning and growing and learning. And Baruch Hashem, we live in a time where people are interested in eating what they're supposed to eat. But the problem is everybody wants to eat everything. And what's starting to happen, and it happens a lot before Pesach, and that's why it's appropriate to speak about today. What could be wrong? That's the words I hear all the time. What could really be wrong with this product? Or why is this product, if it's kosher all year, not kosher for Pesach? What could be chametzig about this product? So Starashevsky gave you a small taste of what could be wrong. But the list, it was really just a small taste. He didn't want to take away from my time, I guess. The list is endless. The list is endless. Whether it's kalim, whether it's ingredients that you don't know where they come from or how they're made. The world changed. Rabbi Elif mentioned that we give hashgacha in 106 countries around the world. The way they make things in different countries are different than the way they make it here. I'll give you a simple example. Glucose, citric acid are all fermentations. In America, we're used to everything like that to be made out of corn, because there's abundance of corn in the United States. In Europe, there isn't corn, so they're using wheat to make those ingredients. So you have simple ingredients, the basic food ingredients, that could be chametz or could be derivatives of chametz, and you'll never know from looking at the ingredient panel. So I need to implore you and ask of you, don't make assumptions and don't say what could be wrong. I'm not going to go into the other element, which is the chinuch element. The chinuch of our children, who we want to be mechanech them to know what kashrus is about and to live a life of kosher. It's not a good chinuch that when a child sees something on the table and it doesn't have a hechsher and you tell him, well, I know it's kosher anyway. Or even he'll say, I spoke to a Rav, or I spoke to Hechsher, and they said it's kosher anyway. They might have said that. I'm sure that if you're saying that, it's true. But children don't understand those nuances. And bringing into your home a attitude that we can make our own decisions and that food is kosher without a Hechsher is not a good attitude. And the last I noticed, there's plenty of kosher food available. Nobody's going hungry. And therefore, that attitude should change and should be part of the way we think.
Okay, we'll start with a breakfast shiloh from the oilam that is, does coffee need a hatcher? Both regular and for Pesach.
Okay, so coffee is as follows. So plain regular coffee, caffeinated or decaffeinated, all year round, does not need a hechsher. But there's a number of points I'd like to add to it. Number one, for Pesach, certainly the caffeinated coffee needs a reliable hechsher, because there are many places that have different ways of decaffeinating the coffee, and alcohol is a method of decaffeinating coffee. And of course, whenever you hear the word alcohol, you need to be concerned if that alcohol is kosher Pesach alcohol or not. That's for Pesach, and that's simple coffee. Let's take flavored coffee. So Rabbi Starashevsky touched upon flavors. So obviously, after now that you've heard that flavorings need hashgacha, every flavored coffee needs a hashgacha. But I want to tell you two more things. We have now discovered that the coffee companies with a roast coffee. So roasting coffee is garnish garnish. You just take the coffee bean and you roast it. What could be wrong? But most of these places are also selling flavored coffee. And we were always under the assumption, and that was always usually the case, that first you roasted the coffee, and only after you roasted the coffee, if you wanted to make flavored coffee, you then added the flavor, and there was no heat involved, and there was no kalim issue. We've discovered that some factories have actually reversed the method of roasting coffee. And they first add the flavor, and after they add the flavor, they then roast the coffee. So now if the flavor is not kosher, then you have a problem with kalim. Moreover, what's become popular is whiskey infused coffee. You have coffee beans that are infused with whiskey, which is chametz gomer, and that whiskey infused coffee, afterwards they're roasting regular coffee beans on the same line. So it's not common. I'm not going to tell you something is common that's not. But on the other hand, there's Baruch Hashem much certified l'kosher Pesach coffee. So it goes back to the point I made, that you should probably buy, if you can, decaffeinated coffee for certain. But even non-decaffeinated coffee, if it's available with a hechsher, that's what you should buy. There's one other, Rabbi Starashevsky, in his talk, kept on speaking about subjects that we're not going to speak about today. So I'm also going to tell you a subject that we're not going to speak about today, but is a very, very important subject that you can't ignore when a question about coffee is asked, and that's Starbucks. So besides having a problem with spending $6 for a coffee, again, I'm giving away my age, but besides with that, I don't know how a Ben Torah buys a coffee in Starbucks. I don't know how Ben Torah, a person who is Ben Torah, a person who learned in yeshiva, a person who's bringing up children, al derech haTorah, buys a coffee in Starbucks. And certainly not in Lakewood. There's probably plenty of coffee in Lakewood with a hechsher. And people, I hope the Rav is masking, okay, that I'm giving Musar, should not be buying coffee in Starbucks. Anytime.
Can I just ask one question? The grainy coffee, is the grainy coffee considered nevushel?
So that's a good shaila. Is there problem bishul akum on coffee?
No, bishul bishul on Shabbos.
Oh, bishul akum bishul on Shabbos. So that's the shaila.
It's so true as everything.
Right. So that's the shaila if you consider roasting bishul or you consider roasting afiyah.
It doesn't go through another process.
No, it doesn't. Just goes through roasting.
Okay, one second, we're gonna.
Dunkin' Donuts as
I have
well.
one question.
Yeah.
So,
Now Rabbi Elf is running the show. I'm only
just
a
there's
guest.
a lot of questions again.
I'm only a guest.
Everyone's got questions. We're gonna keep moving along here.
I have one question. Sorry.
The next question: once we've had our coffee for the morning, whether it's at Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks or not there,
We're not. We're having peeling.
is there a problem with something that says that's 100% vegan? It has no hashgach on it, but it says that it's 100% vegan.
So again, this is one of the most common mistakes. Vegan. So vegan means it's vegetarian, but let's think about vegetarian. So certainly if it's a food that could be bishlakum, vegan doesn't solve the problem of bishlakum. Vegan doesn't solve the problem of bishlakum, and if it's a food that, so rice, so I would guess, I don't know if I've ever been in a vegan restaurant, but I guess if you went to a vegan restaurant, the most popular food on the menu would be rice, because it's vegan and you can do a lot of things with rice. But rice has all of the reasons that there should be a bishlakum. It's oil al shulchan lochem, it's a significant food. It's not nechel commercial chai, you can't eat rice raw, so there's bishlakum. So the fact that it's vegan doesn't solve your bishlakum issue. But then, okay, it's vegan. We're using vegetable oil. But vegetable oil doesn't mean it's kosher, because the same oil that's vegetable oil that supposedly is coming only from a vegetable source can be refined on the same equipment that they're refining animal fats. And that would be mamish tray for vegetable oil. So making any assumption that because it's vegan, it must be kosher, it must be parv. And then, of course, the most important point to make, and it's a halachic point, it's not an emotional point. The halachic point to make here is that goyim don't have nemanis. The halach is a goy doesn't have nemanis. And if a goy tells you everything is so or so, they have no nemanis that you could believe them. So even if they were going to make all sorts of claims, those claims cannot be believed according to the basic halacha. And therefore, of course, just eating something because it's vegan or going into a vegan restaurant and saying what could be wrong is unacceptable. Again, Rabbi Elf's the boss.
Again, everyone's got questions. If you have, you can either email us koshereducation@ou.org, or write down, there's a pad of paper going around with questions. Again, everyone's got questions. We're trying to get it to as many as we can, but we need to move along. The next, again, there's a pad going around.
Yeah.
Someone had a question that they've bought many fruits and vegetables. They've never seen a bug on any fruit or vegetables. So why isn't that enough to make it kosher?
It's a great question. It's a very, very good question. The
I
question.
have never seen a bug on any fruit or vegetable. So why isn't that sufficient to make it kosher and just be able to eat it?
It's a great question, and it's not a simple question. I actually gave a shir in our shul last week about this. Again, this is one of the things that the world has changed, and we grew up in a world where everybody ate every vegetable and every fruit. The only thing everybody knew was the romaine lettuce for Pesach has to be checked, but everything else was eaten. So, vegetables is not a Pesach issue. Vegetables is a all-round issue. First of all, there's a reality fact, and the reality fact is that when we grew up, they used in the United States DDT. DDT is a very strong disinfectant of cleaning, pesticide, of cleaning vegetables. DDT became illegal in the 60s and 70s. So you don't have that strong pesticide that will clean your vegetables. The reality is that the reality is, and people who know what they're looking for, do see on vegetables and fruits different things. Now, what's the halacha? It's always important to approach a shaila with what the halacha says. So the halacha is very clear. The Torah was not given to malachim. Not only was the Torah not given to malachim, you're only obligated to pay attention to what you see. And therefore, the halacha does not require that even though your tefillin have to be a perfect square, there's nobody that I know of that every day brings some sort of a device to check if the tefillin is a perfect square. And the halacha, the Mishnah Berurah says that you're not mechuyev. I know in Lakewood this may not work, but you're not mechuyev to put your esrog under a microscope. You're not mechuyev to do that. The Mishnah Berurah says that. However, and that's why we're allowed to breathe the air in this wonderful shul. Even though, I don't know who built the beautiful shul, but whoever built it wasn't able to prevent that there aren't any organisms in the air. Because I assure you all that there are organisms in the air that we're all breathing right now. But there's no problem, because we don't see them. And what you don't see, you don't have to be concerned with. The issue is, if you see something, what do you have to do? So if you're from New York, if you see something, you ignore it. But now I'm in New Jersey, and New Jersey has a different attitude. They don't just ignore anything they see. And that's why the Gedolei HaPoskim, I had the schus myself to speak with Rabbi Yoshev about this shaila. Says if you see what you think is schmutz, you see a black dot, you think it's just dirt. But if somebody has a trained eye, he'll be able to notice that it's not schmutz. It's actually walking and talking. There you have to be machmer. That is our position, and that's why the world of vegetables changed.
Okay, some more early morning questions, and that is, what is the story with tequilas? Are all tequilas kosher? And are all tequilas kosher with Pesach?
All tequilas are, tequila for all year round is kosher, tequila for Pesach not. You should only buy, but Baruch Hashem, Lo Alman Yisrael, and there are many certified tequilas for Pesach, you'll all be fine.
going back to the bugs for another second, because I guess it's bugging a lot of people. Is triple washed enough to make something
Absolutely
clean?
not. Absolutely not. I want to make a very important point. I was just on the radio last night. I was asked the same question. You are not obligated to buy vegetables from the companies with a hechsher. Because a vegetable or a lettuce, a romaine lettuce that's washed, or it's not washed at all, is not usher. There's nothing non-kosher about it. What you need to do is wash it and check it, and hopefully you know what you're doing. I would recommend you give the job to your wives, to make sure that they're clean. But on one hand, there are people that tell me all the time that they buy romaine lettuce and different brands that they find are very clean, and they just wash them and check them, and they're fine. But the fact that it was triple washed doesn't make a difference. It may make it easier, but it's not something that you can rely on for itself to assume that just because it's triple washed, I could eat it without any shaila. I also want to make a comment. If you're checking, you don't want to buy, especially because now before Pesach it's very expensive, and you use a lot of romaine lettuce at the salad, at the Seder, and other times. And I don't want to buy the brands with the hashgacha. I want to buy it myself and wash it and check it, which I'm supporting. But if you buy a non-certified brand, and you come back and you tell me I never found anything, then you're not checking right.
Okay.
A light box is very useful. It's a big help how to check. And all the hashgachas sell them, they're not a big deal.
Okay, can we buy
You can buy
kosher?
them in all farm stores also.
Can we buy kosher fish in a non-kosher store if it still has the skin on it?
Technically you can buy kosher fish if you see the fish. But the issue now is two things. One is the counter. So you have to make sure that the counter on which they're going to cut the fish is going to be completely kosher. And the other thing is the knife. If that store is using the same knife for kosher fish and non-kosher fish, so now there's dukka de sakina into the non-kosher fish. So if you dafka want to buy the fish in the non-kosher fish store, again, when you come, you have to come yourself and see the fish. You have to make sure that the counter is completely clean, wiped down, and you should bring your own knife. And I want to make a point. If the storekeeper, he's in a Jewish neighborhood, there was a store 2 blocks away from where I live in Borough Park, till not long ago, there was a non-kosher fish store that had a sign, had a hechsher on the kosher fish. And what was the hechsher on the kosher fish? He said that he has a knife that he only uses for kosher. It goes back to what I said a few moments ago. A goy has no nemanis. And the guy telling you that this knife is only used for kosher fish, you can't trust when he says it. And he has a lot of fish there and a lot of non-kosher fish, and he's not Jewish and he's not observant and he couldn't care, and there's certainly no mashgiach there. So how do you know that he never uses that supposed kosher knife for not using it for the non-kosher fish?
Okay, the most popular question that we get at the OU, and we get it here as well several times so far, what's the story with the OU? Are things dairy, are they dairy equipment, and especially Oreo cookies?
Okay, so in terms of Oreo cookies, because we got to get that off the table, we get that question. We have 2 rabbonim at the OU, full time, all year round. One answers questions on the phone, and one answers questions that come in by email or whatever. Obviously, as this time of the year comes around, we increase the staff, we increase the hours, but the most popular question we get is, what is the status of Oreo cookies? We get that question about 300 times a week. We think it may be one person asking it. but we get the question very often. So all the plain Oreo cookies are OUDE, dairy equipment, not dairy. That I only could take a chrayas for the regular Oreo cookies. I've never eaten Oreo cookie. I'm okay. But apparently Oreo cookies have all sorts of specialties, and they coat them and they color them. Those are not necessarily made in Oreo's main factory. Oreo's main factory is a factory in Chicago, It's the biggest commercial factory in the world. The belt that goes into the oven, to bake those Oreo cookies is 2 city blocks long. And just to make it interesting for you, imagine kashering that, because we did. Because Oreo was mamish chaza treif. Oreo used to be made with lard. And then they stopped using the lard. And after they stopped using the lard, that's when they decided that we might as well become kosher. And the ingredients, we worked with them. But now we had to figure out how to kasher that bakery. And we did, Baruch Hashem. So that bakery does not use dairy. It's only dairy equipment. So before somebody asks, so why aren't they labeled DE? It's a great question. Because they don't want to label them DE. And the reason they don't want to label it DE is they want to have the ability to switch back and be dairy. And if they're going to start labeling them DE, and now they're really dairy, all that labeling that they're going to have is going to have to be thrown out. So they're willing to forego the customer who doesn't know it's DE and wants to eat it in Borough Park or Lakewood. They're willing to forego it and keep the label and not take a risk on losing labels. But right now, they are DE. And yes, if that were to change, which we don't see changing, but you never know, if that were to change, we will notify the public in many different fashions that it's not DE anymore. But currently, they are DE. In terms of the general question about D and DE, so first let's explain what D is and what DE is. The way I always explain it is as follows. If you have a pat, a milchige pat, and you cook spaghetti in that milchige pat, could you eat that spaghetti together with fleischiks? No. Could you eat that, not lechatchila, you're not supposed to eat it with fleischiks. Could you eat that spaghetti right after fleischiks? Yes. That's the definition of DE. That's the definition of DE. There's one more wrinkle. Because what does it mean when we certified that something is DE, it was made on kalim that also bake dairy, but they were cleaned properly in between, so there's no residue of dairy, and therefore it's DE, the next product. However, there's a very fundamental halacha to Geshaila, which I'm not going to pass on for you. You should talk to your Rav about. The keli that was used to bake dairy, and now is clean. How does the halacha look at that keli? Because it wasn't Chol Yisrael, and you're makben on Chol Yisrael. So if you're makben on Chol Yisrael, what is your attitude towards Chol Stam? Is your attitude towards Chol Stam is surabola, that Chol Stam is treif? If that's the case, you have to kasher. And the equipment is not kasher. I told you it's clean, but it's not kasher. If on the other hand, I only eat Chol Yisrael, but I'm not so medagdik, and I don't consider Chol Stam isura, so kashering isn't required, then you could eat DE. So just to give you some history, at the OU, we never had a DE designation for a number of reasons. First of all, not everybody is as sophisticated as this audience to understand what DE allows and what DE doesn't allow. Number two, companies weren't always sophisticated to understand it. And the mashgichim, we spoke to mashgichim over the years, it's a big achrayus to make sure that the equipment is perfectly clean. If you're going to call a dairy factory if you're going to allow a dairy factory to make product that's DE, you the mashgiach have to take the achrayus that the equipment is really clean. And many of our mashgichim told us, let's not take that achrayus so we don't have to. But the reality is, more and more consumers were calling us about the DE status of foods. And the Makkah Patish was a number of years ago, Kellogg's came to us for supervision. And Kellogg's has a number of cereals that are kosher and they're DE. And they said, we're only going to come to the OU if you'll agree to put on a DE designation. Since we weren't sure what to do, that was the Makkah Patish, and that's when we decided to start using the DE designation. And that's why you'll find products with the DE. But what we did this year is to take this a step further. There are companies that the products are DE, but like I gave you the example with the Oreo cookie, don't have the product listed, don't have it the symbol as OUDE, the symbol is OUD, but they're really DE. So we now began, and we have on our website a section of all the DE products. Even if they're listed as the product says DE, they're really DE, and you can look that up, and you'll see on the OU Kosher website that list. Again, I urge you to check that list on a periodic basis, because things change, and you can't rely on the symbol on the product, because the symbol is OUD. Last point is, again, as I keep on repeating, don't make an assumption based on reading the ingredient panel. Reading the ingredient panel will not be an indication if the product is D or DE. There are many ingredients that you think are parav or what could be looking about them. I go back to Rabbi Starashevsky's presentation, flavors being the best example.
Okay, the OU is a very large certifying agency. So is it, smaller pockets, or does every product have the same level of kashrus? And are there some products that are more b'diavad and some more l'chatchila?
Well, we don't give hashgacha based on b'diavad. Rabbi Starashevsky mentioned ein bevatel nisel chatchila. We never rely on bittul that will say there's just a drop of this ingredient in the product, and therefore it's fine. There's no such a thing. There's no b'diavad. Again, you're entitled to your standard. The best example I could give is regarding Chol Yisrael. You could be makben Chol Yisrael. The OU doesn't make a secret that we're not makben Chol Yisrael. But nobody at the OU is ever going to tell you that a product that's not Chol Yisrael is Chol Yisrael. And nobody at the OU is going to tell you that you shouldn't be makben Chol Yisrael. We're going to be transparent about what we do. Number two, as Rabbi Elif said, we're a very large organization, and we have factories that we certify in every one of the 50 states and 106 countries. But there's only one OU headquarters in downtown Manhattan. And the reason it was done that way, and there were many, many times there were suggestions and ideas that we should open up regional offices in different places around the country and around the world. And we've avoided doing that because of the need for consistency. And the way we're able to achieve consistency is that everybody who's running the hashgacha is concentrated in our headquarters in Manhattan. This is not the time and place to give you a management course, how we establish the management structure at the OU. But suffice it to say, Rabbi Genak is the CEO of the OU, I'm the COO. Everything funnels towards a triangle on the top. So there's one consistent policy that is followed throughout the OU.
Okay. A couple questions about vitamins and medications. Does vitamins need hashgacha? What about medications?
First of all,
General and Pesach.
General and Pesach. So let's talk about medicines. The first thing I need to tell you about medicines, and I hope the Rav gives me the rishus to say this. Anybody who has a chronic condition, and the definition of a chronic condition is not that you chas v'shalom laid up in bed or you're laid up in a hospital, but you have a heart condition, you have blood pressure condition, kidney. I'm not a doctor, and we don't have to mention all the machlas that there are. But anybody who has that type of a condition and is taking a medicine, which is a pill that you swallow, not a chewable nor a liquid, what I tell you, is to take that medicine all year round, and take that medicine on Pesach. And don't look at lists, they all don't mean anything anyway. And there's no point, there's no need, there's no point, just take the medicine. And it's not being frum when you don't take the medicine. It's not being frum when you don't take the medicine. There are too many issues that I've seen and heard, and I'm sure the Rav and every other person who's in this world of Rabbanis have seen people who thought they were being frum and weren't taking medicine over Pesach, and then ended up with a stroke because they weren't taking their blood pressure medicine, or ended up with a heart attack because they weren't taking their heart medicine. Just take the medicine and don't ask shilos. Now, that's in terms of medicine, Pesach and all year round. Now when it comes to a liquid medicine or chewable, Those are a little more complicated. Those are indeed a little more complicated, and that's why I always recommend, especially with dealing here with adults that could all take pills to swallow, try to get your doctor to prescribe medicines that you swallow and that there's shloike derech achila and you don't have a problem. If you can only take a medicine because it's only available in a liquid or chewable, or it's your child that obviously you have new issues, these are difficult shilas. There's room to be makel. There's certainly room to be makel. The more unwell the person is, the more you can be makel. But that's already a question that you ought to speak to your Rav, both whether it's around the year or Pesach. In terms of vitamins, vitamins is a very, very complicated issue. So the good news. First, let's talk about the good news. The good news is that there are many companies that have very extensive lines of vitamins with reliable hashgacha. I don't work for any of them, so I'm not advertising any of them. Maxi Health and Zahler's and Frida, and there's some smaller ones that don't have such extensive lines, and there are companies in Etzisro. Teva, which is one of the largest pharmaceuticals in the world, has some vitamins that are certified by Eida Chredis. So there's a very decent amount of product that's certified, and that's what you should take, and you don't have to have a shayla. What is the halacha on Pesach? So Pesach, it's much more of a complicated question. I would much more prefer that this be deferred to the Rav. He should take a Christ for his kilo. Because the question is a vitamin a machal briim, or is a vitamin a medicine? And it has a lot of different conclusions. If you consider it a machal briim, then you can take it on Shabbos.
This coming Shabbos, the shir is going to be on this time.
Okay, so I'll let you talk.
Afternoon.
Okay, so you'll come to the shir and you'll hear. Let's go back.
Okay, this fresh cut up fruit sold in major supermarkets, not a kosher supermarket, but a regular supermarket, a Trader Joe's, and like need a hachshir if it's just plain fruit.
So typically, you don't really have to worry in a supermarket. I want to be very, very clear on what I'm saying. People ask about cut off fruit, and there's two places that the question comes up. One is in a supermarket, and one is in a restaurant, where people feel that they need to go to a non-kosher restaurant for business meetings. Again, it's something that everybody should be thinking about. Before we talk about what you're going to eat in the restaurant, is it appropriate that a person with a yarmulke, a person of Ben Torah, is eating in a non-kosher restaurant? I have to tell you a fantastic story. We at the OU have balabatim. All rabbanim have to have balabatim, right? So we have balabatim, and there's a committee of balabatim who oversee our activities. And there was an individual who I was very, very friendly with, and was a prominent balabas at the OU. And he calls me one day, he says, I made a decision that you're not going to be happy with, but I feel I have to tell you what I did. Okay, I was worried he's firing me or cutting my salary. He says, no, nothing like that. He says, I was asked by the president of the OU to be the chairman of the Kashrus committee. And he was a very good friend of ours, and he really was a good person. It would have been fantastic to have him as the chair. He says, but I declined. I said to him, how'd you do that to me? He said, I told you you're not going to be happy. He said, Taka, why did you decline? You like kashrus and you're involved. Why did you not take it? So he says, he's a wealthy man, a big businessman. He says, I sometimes have business meetings in a non-kosher restaurant. And I may even eat a fruit salad there. And he says, I'm not asking you. I'm telling you this is what I do. He says, I'm not asking you, this is what I do. He says, but it's not appropriate that I should be the chairman of OU Kosher, the largest hashgacha in the world, and be eating in a tray for restaurant. That doesn't work together. And that's why I had to say no. And that conversation had a lot of impact on me. And I think it's important for everybody here to think about, is this where you want to be seen in a non-kosher restaurant? I just was asked, should you wear a yarmulke when you go to the non-kosher restaurant? You know what? If you have to be asked that question, then it's a raya you shouldn't be there. But in terms of the fruit salad, that was off the topic. Now we'll get back on the topic. We're at the fruit salad in a restaurant. Anybody who's ever been in a kitchen of a restaurant, particularly as things get busy in the kitchen of the restaurant, see that it's mamish mishigan. And because they see that it's really crazy, they're just trying to fill the orders. The customers are sitting at the tables, they want their food. And whatever knife is there, that's the knife that they're going to use. So if somebody ordered a fruit salad, and a minute ago that knife was used to cut tray for meat or tray for whatever, nobody's paying attention. We just need to make the fruit salad. And since we need to make the fruit salad in a restaurant, I don't know how you could eat a fruit salad without being concerned what was the knife that was used to cut it up.
Okay. Some more product questions. Also, what about products that just say, again, mentioned this before, but again, bears repeating. It says national product is only one thing. It's not, let's say, just chia seeds or just nuts.
Those are easier. For Pesach, we tell people the most raw nuts are fine, besides the pecans, right? Pecans.
Pecans.
Pecans. Yeah.
What's wrong? It's good.
No, the way that
The way they're produced. Again, there are people that said that they've seen almonds that are pasteurized. It's true that almonds are pasteurized many times, but the equipment that they use to pasteurize the almonds are used only for almonds.
Peanuts also.
Peanuts is actually a machlokes and menhagim. Most people nowadays, when I came to the OU, we certified peanut oil for Pesach. But now more and more people in the community don't eat peanuts on Pesach. It's really, just interestingly, a machlokes between the Litvische and the Chassidische. In the Chassidische community, they considered peanuts kidneys. In the Litta, they did not consider peanuts kidneys. But I guess the Chassidim won. That's why there's no more peanut oil.
Literally, there was no food, so they had
I guess they eat peanuts. Give them peanuts.
the hour's getting late, so we're gonna just do a few more questions before we break, because I'm sure everyone has their wives waiting for them at home to get ready for Pesach. But a few other questions. What's the story with soft drinks? Are all soft drinks have hashgacha? Can I get them in any bottle without hashgacha? Can I get them at a fountain? Can I get Slurpees?
Okay, slow. In terms of all soft drinks are divided in a number of categories. There's the cold fill and the hot fill. The cold fill is like soda. That's called cold fill. There are no kalim issue on cold fill beverages, but there are issues about the flavors and the ingredients used to make the cold fill soda. And that's the same question that comes up at the Slurpees. The Slurpees, everything is all cold. But the issue is, are the flavors that are, the different flavors that are available, are they kosher? And there's a list printed on the OU website. I think other hashgachas also have it on their websites. Which flavors are kosher? Some are kosher but are milchiks, and some aren't certified at all. And a very important point. Well, let's say there's a certain flavor of a certain drink that you always drink, and you know it's kosher. That doesn't mean that that flavor, when it's used to make a Slurpee, is kosher. It could go in both directions. It could go, it could go in both directions. And since it could go in both directions, you need to look at the list. But there's no kalim issue because it's all cold, and because when you buy a Coke, let's say a Coke flavor, you don't have to worry that you're going to get the previous person's flavor, because they don't want your Coke to taste orange. So they're rinsing it between flavors. Coca-Cola all year round. And again, very, very important. Not for Pesach, but Coke for all year round in the United States is always kosher, both Coke and Diet Coke. That has nothing to Pesach, of course, that's not the case. Pesach, you have to look for the certification, usually with a yellow cap on the Coke and on the Diet Coke. That's not available everywhere. That's the cold. That's what we call the cold fill. Now we have the hot fill. The hot fill, again, is like Snapple. That goes through a pasteurizer as it's filled. Rabbi Starashevsky is in charge of one of the largest companies in the country that makes hot fill beverages. And this company, all these companies that do this, typically don't only hot fill one type or one company. They're what's known as contract packers. You come to them and you say, I want to make, somebody here has a great idea, I'm going to have the next Snapple. So he has the next Snapple, and he's not going to build a factory with this type of complicated equipment. He goes somewhere and he has a contract with them that they're going to fill it. But it's Caleb because it's all hot filled. So now you have to make sure that when they're going from a non-certified flavor to a certified flavor, that they're kashering the equipment properly. And therefore, there for certain, you have to make sure that it has a reliable hashgacha. And even the same flavor, it's not like Coca-Cola, that if you buy Coca-Cola anywhere in the United States during the year, it's fine. You could have the same product, which has a hashgacha in one part of the country, because it's being hot filled in a factory that has hashgacha, and then in another part of the country, that same company with that same flavor is being bottled in a non-certified company, and therefore you can't drink it.
Certain Pesach products have multiple hachsherim. I'll have prominently displayed in OUP, which is Ozer Kosher Pesach, but then some of the other hachsherim say Rak Limois Hashana, or that doesn't ain't call it Pesach. What's the story with that? Is it certified for Pesach? Is it not certified for Pesach? Why would it write that?
So first of all, anything that has the OUP on it is certified for Pesach by the OUP. Can you eat it? I think so. In terms of the other hashgachas saying not the Rak Limois Hashana, usually it's not a kashrus issue, because they wouldn't let their product have that type of a symbol if they really thought that the product was not kosher Pesach. This came up mostly in Eretz Yisrael. The Eidach Chareidis, which is moving also, but as I knew the Eidach Chareidis years ago, were very, very makbid that they didn't certify a lot of foods for Pesach, even though they were perfectly kosher for Pesach. Because say, who says that on Pesach you need to eat pickles? And who says on Pesach you need to have chewing gum? And therefore, even though they knew that the product was 100% kosher for Pesach, they didn't want to have their symbol saying that this product is kosher for Pesach, and that's why it has that kind of disclaimer.
I'm not sure what the story is with this Shul kitchen, but someone sent the following question. Can you rely on a Shul's kitchen that does not have a designated mashgiach or a lock on the door?
I don't know a good answer to that question.
Can you repeat the question?
The question is, what is the status of Shul kitchens? I have to tell you, Rabbi, that this is a huge, huge issue. I'm actually on a committee. There's an organization called ACO. ACO is an association of kosher organizations. The OU is a member of ACO. Rabbi Genak and I are both members of the executive of ACO. And there's a committee now in ACO that is working on this very issue. You come to a shul and there's a kiddush on Shabbos in the shul. And who is giving the hashgacha? Who is watching, and I've seen this in shuls where I daven, that the plug didn't fall out from the heat, from the warmer during the night. And when the waiter comes in the morning and he sees that that plug fell out, doesn't just stick it in, and you'll never know the difference. Who's watching all of the different shilas? And then of course there's the issue, and again, everybody should do what they need to do. I know in my shul where I'm a Rav, I stopped allowing homemade cakes in the shul. I don't allow homemade cakes, and I have a small shul, and I only have really from people in the shul. You know, I don't know what's doing in anybody's kitchen, and the only cakes that are allowed in the shul are cakes that come with hechsher. And the same thing should be with salads. We spoke earlier about what's involved in checking vegetables. I don't know what's doing in other places. I still remember, and I give this person credit, many years ago when I made weddings and I made Sheva Brachos in a hall, and my wife wanted to have salads, and the hall was charging an exorbitant price for the salad. So my wife said, I'll make salad at home. And her sisters said, we'll make salads and bring it to the simcha. And we called the hall, and they said, you know, the Rav HaMachshir doesn't allow outside food without a hechsher that he's comfortable with. I happen to know that Rav HaMachshir very, very well. And I called him, and he knows me. He's eaten in my house. He says, Rabbi Elephant, I know you. I know what you do. He says, I'm not making an exception. And maybe at that point I wasn't so happy, but I respect that decision. I respect that decision because once you're relying on everybody, you as a Rav, you can't say, well, this person I know, they're very medagdik and they're checking the vegetables, and this person I don't know. And then one final part to this discussion, which is a whole new conversation, which I don't know if we have time for, I don't think we have time, is something called party planners. Party planners are allergic to kashrus. Party planners are allergic to kashrus. And they are many simchas. You have a party planner, they don't have a hechsher, typically. They bring all sorts of stuff. Maybe we'll end with this story because it's a great story, so you'll remember it. A Rav a mashgiach in Miami told me this story. There was an affair taking place in Miami in a hall, and this was under a hashgacha, a very reliable hashgacha with a mashgiach there, everything fine and well. It's a couple of minutes before this man, and a woman walks in carrying boxes, unmarked boxes, just boxes with food in them, salads and cakes, and says that this is for the simcha. And the mashgiach says to this individual, to this woman, who is this? What are you? She says, I'm the party planner. And I was hired by the Bali Simcha to do this event. And who are you? He says, I'm the mashgiach. And my job is to not let anything into this kitchen that doesn't have a reliable hashgacha. And she says, and he says, and this doesn't have a reliable hashgacha, and it can't come into this kitchen. So she goes running out to the Baal Simcha, who obviously had hired her and paid her, and says, this is what's going on. And the rabbi, what are we going to do here? And he's standing firm, I'm not letting it in. And the Baal Simcha's there, and the Baal Simcha's getting upset. Don't ask. And it came to the point that we were having this altercation. This has nothing to do with the OU. This is just a story I'm repeating. They were having this altercation, and they did nothing else than call the police. They called the police, and the police came and said, what's the problem here? And she says, my food has been kidnapped. And to make a long story short, they explained, the two parties here explained to the police what's going on. And it was a smart policeman in New York. The policeman would have been after Shabbos already. But the policeman said, you know what? Set up a table outside, not in the hall, and there you can put your food. It was a good idea. But this is the problem of party planners. And if you hire a party planner and she brings food and you don't know where that food is coming from, so you have the most wonderful simcha, but you don't know about the kashrus of the food. And they can be set up beautifully. And this really is a good way to end, because this is where we began. These are things that we take for granted, but we shouldn't take them for granted. And we should be thinking all of the time about what we're eating and the kashrus of what we're eating.